Some mysteries are not solved. They're read, page by page. We can follow the footsteps of those who walk into the unknown. This is the chronicle of one such man, Professor Hector Demetrius, a scientist who unlocked the secrets of life right before he walked out of his own and into one of history's greatest enigmas. January 10th. The new year began with terrible news. Professor Demetrius has vanished. Professor Hector Demetrius was a renowned biologist, a resident of Heraklion, the capital city of the Greek island of Crete. I never met him in person, but we corresponded by mail about 3 years ago. When I learned he was researching ancient medicine, I sent him some information on the traditional Indian system of Ayurveda. He replied immediately, thanking me. His English penmanship was flawless, and his mastery of the language was simply astonishing. My friend, Professor Somerville, later told me Demetrius had been a student at Cambridge. And it was from Somerville's letter, which arrived yesterday, that I learned of the man's disappearance. The letter laid out the basic facts. On the morning of January 4th at 8 a.m., Professor Demetrius walked out of his house carrying a single suitcase. His servant saw him leave, but had no idea where he was going. When the professor didn't return by evening, the servant called the police. The investigation revealed that Demetrius took a taxi to the Heraklion airport, where he boarded a 10:30 a.m. flight to Cairo. Inquiries in Cairo confirmed he checked into the Alhambra Hotel, stayed for a single night, and then disappeared without a trace. Somerville wrote the letter from Heraklion. Somerville was a good friend of Demetrius. He was in Athens to deliver a lecture and had planned to visit Crete afterwards anyway. But when he read about his friend's disappearance in the papers, he abandoned his other plans and went directly to Heraklion. He decided to investigate the matter himself, and he has asked for my help. I've been to Greece twice, but I've never had the chance to visit Crete. My mind is restless with anticipation. With no pressing work here, I think I'll go. January 14th, I arrived in Heraklion this morning. Demetrius's house is located 3 miles from the city, nestled at the foot of Mount Xyloti. The scenery is magnificent, but this is no time for sightseeing. Somerville is deeply concerned, and for good reason. First, the trail in Cairo has gone cold. There's been no new information. Second, there's no logical explanation for why Demetrius would leave so suddenly, without a word to anyone. A search of his laboratory gave us no clues about his recent work. We did find a green notebook he appeared to have been using. It's filled with writing, but in a strange script and an unknown language that is utterly indecipherable. I've examined it myself. At first glance, some characters resemble English, but taken as a whole, it's meaningless. I asked Somerville if it could be a code. It wouldn't surprise me, he said. He had a peculiar fascination with languages. Have you heard of Linear A? I had. It's the name modern archaeologists have given to an undeciphered script from ancient Crete, dating back to 2000 BC. Somerville confirmed Demetrius had been studying it for some time. Perhaps the notebook contains valuable information transcribed from ancient inscriptions. Demetrius's servant, Michaeli, told us that his master had recently been taking frequent trips to other ancient sites on Crete, staying for 5 or 6 days at a time, and returning with stone fragments. We've seen many such fragments in his study and lab. But something else Michaeli said has made Somerville even more anxious. On the before Demetrius left, Michaeli heard a gunshot from the hills behind the house. Demetrius wasn't home, but he returned just 10 minutes later. The professor owned a rifle, though it hadn't been used in years. Now, that rifle is missing. Michaeli has a clever 10-year-old son. I'm not sure if we can trust his story, but on the afternoon of the same day, he heard a tiger's roar coming from the forest. I know for a fact that tigers have never existed on Crete. So I asked him, how would he even recognize such a sound? He grinned and said he'd heard one at a circus that visited Heraklion. It's plausible enough. All told, the situation is deeply perplexing. We've decided to investigate the hills behind the house after lunch. From my window, I can see a dense wood of Casuarina trees in that direction. If something happened here, it happened in there. January 15th. I'm writing this in the restaurant at Heraklion Airport. Our flight to Cairo is delayed by an hour, so I have time to record yesterday's strange events. After lunch, around 2 p.m., Somerville and I set out to explore the woods on the mountainside. After about 10 minutes of walking, I caught a familiar, unpleasant scent on the wind. Somerville had a cold and couldn't smell it yet, but I was certain a dead animal was lying somewhere within 100 yards. I followed the scent, with Somerville close behind. Soon, he smelled it too. "Are you armed?" he whispered. I showed him the aniline pistol in my coat pocket. He was clearly worried that whatever killed the animal might still be around. We proceeded with extreme caution. Somerville spotted them first. A group of vultures, about 50 feet away, gathered in a clearing. They were tearing at the carcass of a large black animal. From that distance, we couldn't identify it. As we moved closer, I glanced at the ground and saw a clump of coarse, pitch-black fur lying next to a patch of wildflowers. A bear? I wondered aloud. Highly unlikely, Somerville replied. We both knew bears weren't native to this region. Somerville picked up the fur. The hairs were unusually coarse and nearly a foot long. 10 steps further, we could see the animal's head. Vultures had mangled it, but we could still tell it belonged to some kind of large cat. As we approached, a vulture hopped aside, revealing more of the body. Rib bones, scraps of flesh, and the thick, black-furred hide. The birds were feasting. It's doubtful they had ever tasted panther before on Crete. I use the word panther, but I've never known any panther with fur this long or this coarse. It's a new species of gray cat, Somerville concluded. There's no other explanation. But is this what was shot with the rifle? It seems likely, I said. But was Demetrius the one who shot it? When we told Michaeli about the creature, he was baffled. A black animal like a tiger? I've never seen any black animal here except for cats and dogs. Later that evening, we found a diary on the writing desk in Demetrius's bedroom. It was a new, leather-bound volume. Inside, we found entries for January 2nd and 3rd, written in Greek. It didn't take us long to translate them. The words were as cryptic as they were fascinating. The January 2nd entry read, "Throughout my life, I have found that joy and anxiety always walk hand in hand. There is no peace, even in success. I will not attempt another scientific experiment without fully considering the consequences. Regardless, I alone must pay the price. For my mistake, I must get out my father's rifle. I remember its sound from my childhood. I used to be a good shot. Am I still?" When I asked Somerville about the rifle, he told me Demetrius's father had been a famous hunter who traveled all over Africa. That explained the lion skin rug in the drawing room. The entry for January 3rd was even more disturbing. 10 years ago, at a fair in the city of Knossos, an old gypsy woman told my fortune. She said a great danger would befall me on my 65th birthday, one that would be difficult to escape. My 65th birthday is in just 16 days, on January 19th. All her other predictions came true, so I must assume this one will too. Perhaps this very experiment I'm about to undertake will be the death of me. So be it. I have no regrets about dying, so long as I succeed first. But this small, populated island is no place for my work. I need a vast, open space. I need the Sahara. The word Sahara was underlined twice. This explained his trip to Cairo. But what was the experiment, and why did it require a desert? The diary gave no other clues. Hopefully, we can find some answers in Cairo. January 15th, 5 p.m., Cairo. We've checked into the Alhambra Hotel. As I signed the register, I saw Demetrius's name from January 4th. Poof, he was here. Acting like a seasoned detective, Somerville immediately requested the same room Demetrius had used, number 313. Luckily, it was available. We didn't expect to find any clues, as the room had surely been cleaned dozens of times. But our choice paid off. The room boy who brought our luggage gave us some information. "How long have you worked here?" Somerville began. 4 years, the boy replied. "Do you remember the guests who stay in this room?" "I remember the ones who give good tips." "A sharp kid." Somerville described Demetrius. "About 10 days ago, a Greek scientist, short, about 65, bald with dark hair at the sides, sharp nose." The room boy grinned. "He tipped me 75 piastres. Of course I remember." That amounted to several dollars. A generous tip. "He was only here one night, correct?" Somerville asked. "Yes, and for most of that time, the Do Not Disturb sign was on his door." "Did he say where he was going?" "He asked me about camels," the boy said. "He wanted to ride into the desert and asked where to rent them. I told him about the caravan route that starts from Giza and that he could find camels for hire there." This was a vital lead. Giza, home of the Great Pyramids, lies just across the Nile from Cairo. I've been there before, but I've never embarked on a desert journey by camel. We decided to spend the rest of the day asking about Demetrius in Cairo, then head to Giza in the morning. January 16th, 12:30 p.m. We're now part of a caravan of nearly 500 camels, traveling the desert road toward the Bahariya oasis. The other travelers are merchants, taking city goods to trade for dates in remote desert villages, a practice as old as time itself. We've stopped for a rest at an oasis. It's a small valley in the vast expanse of sand, dotted with limestone hills. A small pool is surrounded by date palms and Bedouin tents. There are ancient ruins here, too. What looks like a temple overlooks the water. I'm writing this in the shade of a headless statue. We reached Giza this morning and found the camel rental station. I speak Arabic, so I started asking the locals if they had seen a man matching Demetrius's description. One person pointed me to an old date seller. When I asked him, the old man's face contorted with rage. He started shouting and cursing Demetrius's name. It turns out Demetrius had paid in for dates with coins that included 2 old Greek lepta. The old man's eyesight was poor, and he didn't notice until the foreigner was long gone. To calm him down, Somerville paid the man what he was owed. It's clear we're on the right path. Demetrius hired a camel here and rode into the desert. But did he travel with a caravan, or did he strike out on his own? I have enough of my concentrated food pills, Botica Indica, to last for 15 days. I hope we can find Demetrius by then and find him alive. That gypsy's prophecy has been bothering me. I've seen such predictions come true before, though I can't explain it scientifically. His 65th birthday and his day of supposed danger is January 19th. Today is the 16th. January 17th, 6:30 p.m. My thermometer reads 31 degrees Fahrenheit, negative 0.5 degrees Celsius. It's freezing, but thanks to my personal climate control pills, we're comfortable in simple cotton clothing. I estimate we've traveled about 100 miles in the last 36 hours. Our caravan has stopped for the night. The merchants have lit fires and pitched their tents. The camels chew their cuds solemnly, occasionally letting out a bizarre groaning bellow. I can hear jackals howling, and once I thought I heard a hyena's laugh. We are inside our own tent, working by the light of my invention, the Lumamax. It's a small ball that, when lit with a match, produces a bright light equivalent to a 200-watt bulb for an entire night. I have plenty with me. Now, about the incident this afternoon. Around 4 p.m., a strange, rhythmic sound began to drift on the wind. It was a deep, booming noise, entirely out of place in the silent desert. Like a colossal kettle drum was being struck, over and over. The sound was so profound, the drum that made it would have to be the size of a pyramid. The sound wasn't just audible to me. The other travelers heard it too, and a wave of panic spread through the caravan. The camels grew terrified. A dozen of them collapsed onto the sand, refusing to move. The wind blew, and the sound continued on a steady rhythm. 2 beats, 3 seconds apart, followed by a 5-second pause. Beat, beat, pause. Beat, beat, pause. We dismounted. "What do you make of it?" I asked Somerville. He listened intently. "It sounds like it's coming from beneath the ground," he said. I agreed. It was a powerful, deep sound, but muffled, and it was impossible to tell where it was coming from. The merchants were in an uproar. One old man, his face a mask of wrinkles, ran up to us, babbling about desert demons, a tale straight from the Arabian Nights. He then started pointing at us, trying to convince the others that we were bad luck, that we had brought this curse upon their journey. This was dangerous. If the others believed him, we would be in serious trouble. I noticed the wind was dying down and the sound was growing fainter. This was my chance. I faced the direction of the sound, raised my arms dramatically, and began to chant a series of complex Sanskrit verses in a loud, commanding voice. By the middle of the 5th verse, the wind had stopped completely, and with it, the sound vanished. Needless to say, no one in the caravan bothered us after that. But I have to admit, both Somerville and I are deeply unnerved by that sound. Of course, there is no reason to think that Demetrius could have any connection with this. Somerville's idea is that it is the sound of a drum of the Bedouins or some similar local tribe. In the whimsical weather of the desert, it has been magnified and has taken on an unusually solemn appearance. It might be so, but there's no point in thinking about it anymore, because it doesn't seem like that sound will be heard again. January 18th, 10:30 a.m. The two of us have been forced to be separated from the group. meaning the caravan has gone southwest on the paved road to the Bangia Oasis, and we have left the path and come north. Let me tell you why this happened. After walking continuously from 6 to 8:30 this morning, I suddenly noticed a flock of vultures on a sand dune about 200 yards to the right of the road. For some reason, my heart skipped a beat. Looking back at Somerville, I saw that his gaze was also on the vultures. The caravan was passing by it, yet an indomitable curiosity arose to go forward and see what meat the vultures were so busy eating. I told my camel driver my intention. I said I would leave the group and go towards the vultures, then return and rejoin the group. Do you have any objection? The man agreed in one word. I understood that my act from yesterday had worked. They have taken me for a holy man with supernatural powers. Somerville and I, along with our camels and camel driver, left the group and turned right. About 5 minutes later, we reached the dune and our curiosity was satisfied. What the vultures were tearing apart and eating was the massive body of a camel. But was that all? The other body lying next to it was not an animal's, it was a human's. The two men with us were camel drivers, just like him. It was clear that the camel driver, along with his camel, had strayed from another caravan and met his death here. Did they die on their own, or did someone kill them? What was that lying on the sand about 10 feet away from the flock of vultures? Getting off the camel and walking a little further, I found the answer to my question. What was glittering in the afternoon sun was the barrel of a gun. The butt was under the sand. Picking up the gun, I saw it was a German Mauser rifle. There is no doubt that the lives of these two creatures were ended by a bullet from this rifle. And my mind says that the assailant is none other than Professor Hector Demetrius, who with this same Mauser gun had killed that unknown furry, tiger-like animal in the pine forest on the slopes of the Psiloridus Mountains on the island of Crete. It is also clear that Demetrius had set out on his expedition, riding on the back of this dead camel. Driver's dead camel. At this point, his need for his carrier had ended, so he killed him. After this, wherever Demetrius went, he had to go on foot. I felt pity looking at our two camel drivers. Their faces had turned pale. The reason for this was not just the scene of the murder. For some time, with every gust of westerly wind, we could again hear that drum-like sound. I realized that we had to proceed by following that sound, and if possible, we had to go on camelback. My mind now says that there is a connection between that sound and Demetrius. When I told Somerville, he said, I was thinking the same thing, but this time, don't try to perform any magic tricks. With the wind blowing so frequently, it doesn't seem likely that the sound will stop easily. The camel drivers probably won't agree to go if you just tell them. See if the lure of money works. Money did the trick, but not for a small amount, and a considerable advance had to be paid. For the last 3 hours, we have been heading west, following that sound. We had to stop the camels and dismount after seeing a strange sight. The desert stretches endlessly on all sides, and in the middle of it stands a pyramid-like sand dune, its head held high towards the heavens. In height, it is no less than the Pyramid of Giza, if not more. We have set up camp quite a distance from the dune. Perhaps if we go closer, we will get a more accurate estimate of its size. It is very difficult to estimate in the desert. I can only say that if some gigantic monument of ancient Egyptian civilization is hidden under that sand, then we will be its first discoverers. Nothing can be understood until the sand is removed. I have asked the two camel drivers. They are speechless. Perhaps the incessant sound of the drum has rendered them mute. That deep, solemn sound can always be heard from here. It no longer depends on the wind. It can be said that the sound is a part of the natural environment here. It has been an hour since we arrived. In that time, the sound has not stopped once, nor has its rhythm been broken. Listening to it, it seems as if the sound has always been there and will always be there. Somerville's idea about the sandhill is also that it is actually some ancient pillar or temple-like structure. We have decided that after resting for a while, we will go near the hill and explore it thoroughly by walking around it. However, regarding the sound, he is as bewildered as I am. But he was right about one thing. The sound is coming from under the ground. We have clearly understood that by putting our ears to the sand. This continuous sound of a blacksmith's hammer might disturb our work. Let's see what happens. What fate has in store. Clouds have gathered in the west again. A light breeze is also blowing, and with it, sand. January 18th, 4 p.m. A fierce sandstorm almost blew our tent away. On top of that, an earthquake. But I noticed a peculiarity in this tremor. The shaking was not from side to side like a normal earthquake. With the first jolt, it felt as if a part of the earth under my feet had suddenly shifted its position. And as a result, we, along with everything, moved down quite a bit. It was just like what happens when a chair is suddenly pulled out from under a person who is sitting on it. I know that during a severe earthquake, there is sometimes a rumbling sound. I have personal experience in this matter, but I don't know if a sound like the one that occurred during today's tremor has ever happened before. It felt as if the entire earth had come alive and was groaning in agony. Even I broke into a cold sweat. Murad and Suleiman, our two camel drivers, had both lost consciousness in terror. Both have regained consciousness after being given medicine, but it doesn't seem like they will ever be able to speak again. I see the two camels have become completely still. They are no longer chewing their cud. They are just staring fixedly at that mysterious hill. Due to the earthquake, the hill also seems to have tilted slightly to one side. Or perhaps that is a mistake of my vision. All calculations are getting muddled somehow. The only thing that remains unchanged is that gum-dum drumming sound. After waiting for a while, if it seems there is no more chance of a storm, the two of us will go out once. Nothing can be understood without getting a little closer to the hill. 5:15 p.m. I am writing my diary again, sitting at the foot of that strange desert mountain. From the tent, it seemed tall, but coming closer, it seems much taller. The sound of the drums here is deafening. Somerville and I are managing to communicate by gesturing with our hands and faces. But strangely, it seems that even this eardrum-splitting sound is gradually becoming a habit. It doesn't seem as unbearable as before, nor is it disturbing my thoughts. First, let me try to describe what the hill looks like. Its eastern side rises steeply upwards, right to the peak. From a distance, it looks like an equilateral triangle. From the peak, the sand slopes down to the west, right to the ground, creating two triangular walls on the north and south. That is to say, it cannot exactly be called a pyramid. It has a unique appearance. On the way from the tent to the hill, two strange things were discovered. Somerville is sitting some distance away, examining a sample of one of them. Walking on the sand, the first thing that caught my eye was a rope-like thing, brown in color. The way it emerged from the sand, at first it seemed to be some kind of dried-up plant. But coming closer and examining it with my hand, I realized it was not. Of course, calling it a rope is not quite right either, because each strand is as thick as a stout bamboo. The two of us tried to dislodge it by pulling hard, but we couldn't. Finally, Somerville cut off a small portion with his knife to take with him for examination. The thing that surprised us even more was probably made of some metal. The color of the thing is light red. It looks like a part of the side of a huge wheel. Even from this small part, one can get an idea of the wheel's size. Calculations suggest its circumference is at least 200 feet. That is, a whole tennis court could easily fit inside it. There was no result from pulling this with our hands either. In this desert environment, this gigantic metal wheel is so unusual, and its connection with ancient Egypt is so tenuous that it has given us new cause for thought. So has Demetrius established some kind of laboratory or factory in the heart of the Sahara, to which this rope and this wheel are connected, and the sound of whose machinery is heard from the outside, like the sound of drums? But if so, where is the entrance to this underground factory? How did Demetrius get there? And what terrible secret research could he be engaged in that requires a desolate wasteland like the Sahara? On the eastern side of the hill, that is the side that rises steeply, sand is occasionally crumbling and scattering into the air. It makes one suspect that the inside is hollow and there is a passage for air to circulate through it. How about going to that side and digging the sand with our hands? Somerville has gotten up from his place. He is going towards the east side. I need to go with him. If something happens to one person, the other will be in a very helpless situation. 11:20 p.m. Many strange things have happened in the last 5 hours. First of all, Somerville and I went to the east side of the hill, and, after digging with our hands for about half an hour, found a cavern or a tunnel. Inside it was impenetrable darkness. Even with a powerful torchlight and binoculars, we couldn't see the end. From inside the cavern, strong gusts of wind were coming out, creating a considerable disturbance to our work. Still, we didn't give up. Finally, as evening fell, we were forced to return to the tent. Tomorrow, if we see that the sand has subsided somewhat, we will try to enter the cavern. I have a strong belief that the answer to the mystery lies inside this cavern. Returning to the camp, I arranged for coffee. My pills satisfy both hunger and thirst, but they don't satisfy the pleasure of drinking coffee after a long day's work. Somerville has brought some Brazilian coffee with him. That's what we're drinking. Let me tell you about the strange incident that happened after drinking the coffee. Somerville was sitting with Demetrius's green notebook open. So far, no clue has been found to his strange script and strange writing. Today, too, after flipping through the pages of the notebook for half an hour without any success, Somerville took off his glasses from his eyes, placed them on the open notebook, and sat with his head in his hands. I was sitting beside him, worried, thinking about the series of bizarre experiences, one after another, starting from that strange panther-like animal of that day until today. Just then, my eyes fell on Demetrius's open notebook. Somerville's glasses were placed at an angle on it. I noticed that Demetrius's handwriting was reflected in the glass of the spectacles like in a mirror. Staring at it for a few moments, I realized that I could recognize that writing. That language was a language I knew, and that language was neither Greek nor anything else. It was simple, plain English. In a moment, the whole matter became as clear as water. The matter is nothing else. So that other people cannot read it easily, Demetrius wrote English in reverse. That is, from right to left. This is called mirror writing. As a result, a familiar language becomes an incomprehensible coded language. Yet, if held in front of a mirror, there is no difficulty in reading that language. I remembered that the famous Italian artist Leonardo da Vinci used this mirror writing in his notebooks. For the last hour, holding Somerville's shaving mirror in front, we have read most of Demetrius's writing. What we have learned from the writing is roughly this. From the ruins of a 5,000-year-old temple in the city of Knossos on the island of Crete, Demetrius found an inscription carved on a stone. By deciphering its meaning, he learned that the writing was a formula for a miraculous medicine. It was said that by taking that medicine, divine power would be infused into the human body. Demetrius had resolved to make that medicine, and from his writing, it seems he was successful. Not only that, on the 1st of January, he had apparently tested it by giving the medicine to someone named Felix. Who this person Felix is not mentioned anywhere, but both Somerville and I know. Although Felix is a human name, the real meaning of the word is cat, or an animal of the cat family. For example, the Latin name for a tiger is Felis tigris. So could it be? It's not possible to write anymore. There's a storm outside, and with it, rain. January 22nd. It has been about 2 hours since we reached Cairo. My hand is trembling. Horrific events of the last 2 days while they are still fresh. A whole day was wasted waiting for the caravan. Our camels and both camel drivers are missing, presumably dead. So the two of us had to walk for about 3.5 hours on the sand with our battered and exhausted bodies to get to the caravan route. Thanks to my medicine, the wounds have started to heal. Even Somerville's broken elbow bone has mended. But my mental state is not at all normal. It cannot be. Luckily, the medicine bottle, diary, pen, wallet, duplicate glasses, and the aniline pistol were in my pocket. Everything else, even Demetrius's notebook, has vanished without a trace. On the night of January 18th, while sitting in the tent and writing my diary after 11 p.m., a storm and rain suddenly started, as I have written before. I don't know if it's because it only rains 3 or 4 days a year here, but I have never seen such a blinding downpour and such a fierce storm with it. The canvas on one side of the tent billowed in the wind, and with a flap, first knocked out my lamp. Meanwhile, due to the storm outside, the 2 camels started screaming horribly, and Murad and Suleiman, lying on the sand, were calling out to Allah at the top of their voices. Because my watch has radium on its hands, I can't see the time. Around 11:45, the sound of the storm subsided. Our tent is no longer standing. It is now wrapped tightly around the 2 of us, and we are clinging to it for dear life, so that when the rain stops, we can use it as a shelter again. At exactly 12 o'clock, there was a tremendous flash of lightning, and with it began a cataclysmic earthquake. With the first jolt, I saw that I was no longer on the ground. Something had, in a single jerk, thrown me into the air like a cricket ball hit by a bat. Flying through the air at a tremendous speed for at least 5 seconds, I fell headlong with a thud onto the ice-cold wet sand. There is no longer the cover of the sand. Tent over my head. Somerville is not beside me either. In the impenetrable dark night, in a part of the Sahara, I am alone, lying face down on the sand, getting drenched in the rain. Where is Somerville? Is he alive? What about the camels and the camel drivers? Are they alive? There is no way of knowing anything. Suddenly, with another jolt, I was thrown some distance further. Then the ground became still. Gradually the rain stopped. Then everything was quiet. All sound had stopped. There was no sound at all. That drum-like sound, that too was gone. Strangely, that ear-splitting dum-dum sound had stopped. Instead, an unnatural, suffocating silence pressed down on my chest. But what is the reason for the sudden stopping of that deep, solemn sound from underground? Lifting my head a little, I looked around. The darkness was gone. But how can there be so much light? How can everything be seen so clearly? Suddenly I realized the sky is clear. A single light wisp of cloud is moving away from the moon. A full moon. The cloud moved away. Now it's full moonlight. I have never seen such strangely bright moonlight. What is that? Over there, to the left, in the distance. Is that Somerville? Yes, It's Somerville. He is standing. I called out. No answer. Has he gone deaf? No. He's mad. What is he staring at with such a fixed gaze? My gaze went in that direction, towards the hill. The sand has moved away from the top of the hill, but what has emerged from underneath it? And what is that dense forest on both sides where the sloping part of the hill ends? I moved towards Somerville. I can't take my eyes off the hill. I am breathless with wonder and amazement, because I am gradually understanding that the huge thing that is standing with its head held high towards the sky is actually familiar to me. And the two huge cavities on the steep eastern side, which we thought were tunnels leading to the factory, are also familiar to me. The two cavities are actually nostrils, and the hill is the nose of a reclining man. And the forest on both sides where the sloping part of the nose ends is the eyebrows, and the wide mound below it is the closed eye. Somerville's whispered voice seemed to echo in the unearthly, moon-drenched, horizon-spanning silence of the Sahara. Yes, Demetrius, I have seen that nose in pictures. I have seen those eyebrows too. I have seen those eyes open. Now they are closed because Demetrius is dead. A part of his face is sticking out above the sand, and a part of his chest. That brown rope was actually a hair on his body, and that thing, which seemed to be part of a circle, was actually a fingernail. Do you understand the reason for the earthquake? Somerville asked. I said, I do. Demetrius was thrashing about under the sand on his deathbed. And the drumming sound? Demetrius's heartbeat. Demetrius first tested his medicine on his cat, Felix. That was what was about to create a gigantic cat. Realizing the situation was getting out of hand, Demetrius had taken the help of his gun to stop it. But he did not want his own growth to stop midway. Like a true scientist, he wanted to know the extent of his medicine's power. You're right. He himself believed that he would turn into a giant man. That's why he needed the vast desert for his experiment. Have you tried to guess how tall Demetrius's body would be? I said, if the eastern part of the nose is about 100 feet high, then the whole body should be at least 60 times. That is 6,000 feet, which is more than a mile. Somerville let out a long sigh. Then the old Bedouin woman's words came true. I said, to the letter. Today is the 19th of January. The drumming sound stopped at exactly 12 o'clock at night. We had to wait for daylight. With the sunrise, we saw a horrifying sight. Thousands upon thousands of vultures, like a swarm of locusts, were descending, blackening the sky. It seemed as if all the vultures in the world had gathered together to devour the corpse of that 6,000-foot-long human giant. The sight was not pleasant. At least, this event could not be allowed to happen before our eyes. Taking my aniline pistol out of my pocket and aiming it at the sky, I held the trigger for 3 seconds, and in no time, the flock of vultures vanished, and the clear blue pristine beauty of the rain-washed Sahara sky returned.
What are your thoughts on this? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want to join our community and see more content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.